At family dinner, my brother stood up with that smug smile and said, "Mom and Dad told me you never contribute anything to this family." Everyone laughed, even my parents. The sound of their applause cut through me like glass. I looked around that table I'd paid for in the house I'd helped them keep alive for years, and something inside me just snapped. I smiled back and said, "Perfect." Then the $6,000 I've been paying for their mortgage every month stops today. Dad choked on his drink. Mom's face turned pale. The room went silent, but in that silence, I finally heard the truth. I was never family. Just a paycheck. Before I share my story, I want to know you are here with me. Just say "listening" in the comments or tell me where you are. I love hearing how far my story reach. Sometimes even the smallest connection can make a story feel heard. Thank you. And now, here's my story. And if my story speaks to you, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel. It means more than you think. Sometimes knowing someone out there still believes in kindness helps people like me keep going. My name is Ozias Mercer, and this is how one dinner changed everything. It was supposed to be a celebration, not an execution. I'd spent a whole week preparing candles, a new tablecloth, the smell of roasted turkey filling every corner of our North End home in Boise. I wanted everything perfect. It was my first major promotion since college senior portfolio manager. After years of grinding, I finally felt like I'd earned the right to make my family proud. Renee teased me for buying too much food, and our 9-year-old Micah was in charge of setting napkins and forks. I imagined laughter, clinking glasses, and my father clapping me on the back, proud for once. But as the night began, I sensed something off. The air was colder than the November wind sneaking through the door. My father Harlan gave a stiff nod as he walked in. My mother Darla avoided eye contact. My younger brother Tate came late, phone glued to his hand. Aunt Marla tried to lighten the mood, but her smile looked forced. I brushed off the unease, telling myself I was imagining it. Maybe they were just tired. Maybe this would be the night we finally felt like a family again. We sat down, and I carved the turkey. The sound of the knife against the platter echoed in a way that made the silence feel louder. I raised my glass, ready to tell them about the promotion, but before I could open my mouth, Tate pushed his chair back and stood up. He grinned like he was about to perform. "Mom and Dad said you never contribute anything to this family." For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. Then laughter broke out around the table, small at first, then louder. Even my parents clapped. My father's smug little chuckle cut deeper than I could explain. I felt the room tilt, my pulse pounding in my ears. I didn't yell. I didn't flinch. I just smiled. "Perfect," I said, keeping my voice calm, steady. "Then the $6,000 I've been paying for their mortgage every month stops today." The laughter stopped. My father choked on his wine, coughing violently. My mother's fork slipped from her hand, clattering against her plate. The sound was sharp, final. I didn't look away. 5 years, I said slowly. $72,000 a year. You said I contribute nothing, so now you'll see how that feels. No one spoke. My cousins stared at their plates. Aunt Marla looked horrified. Tate's grin cracked. The jazz music I'd put on played softly in the background, mocking the silence. I pushed my chair back, my legs steady even though my chest was tight. Renee reached for my hand, but I shook my head. I didn't need comfort. I needed air. As I stepped outside, the chill of Boise's night hit my face, sharp and clean. Behind me, the muffled noise of panic began to rise, chairs scraping, whispers colliding, but I didn't turn back. For the first time in years, I felt something that wasn't guilt. I felt free. I didn't know what would come next. I just knew the silence I'd lived in had finally broken. The night after the dinner, I lay awake, replaying every word. Tate's smirk, my father's laughter, my mother's pale face. The words "you never contribute" echoing over the years I'd spent doing exactly that. I kept thinking about how it had all started 5 years ago when I thought I was doing the right thing. I was 26 when my father retired early after a fallout with the principal at the high school where he'd taught. They said it was mutual, but everyone knew he'd been pushed out. My parents' mortgage was behind their savings running dry. I'd just gotten a raise at the firm, so I stepped in $6,000 a month sent straight to their bank. I told myself it would be temporary, maybe a year. Then another year passed and another. Every month, like clockwork, I transferred the money. I even paid $400 a month for their health insurance, plus a few thousand here and there for roof repairs and plumbing issues. It felt good at first, like I was giving back, like I was doing what a good son should. But slowly, something shifted. When I got my first promotion, I texted my mom to tell her the good news. Her reply came minutes later. "Don't forget to send the payment early this month," the bank called. Not "congratulations, not I'm proud of you," just a reminder. My chest tightened that day, but I told myself it didn't matter. Parents didn't always know how to express pride. I kept paying. Then came the year I learned the truth about Tate. I found out by accident an old statement from the bank, a mismatch in the transfer record. He'd used my payments to clear part of his credit card debt, claiming it was for Mom and Dad's bills. I confronted him once years ago quietly. He laughed and said, "You're overreacting. We're family." I let it go. I thought keeping peace mattered more than calling out betrayal. But the more I gave, the more invisible I became. Conversations with my parents were reduced to logistics. Did the payment go through, or can you cover the insurance this month? Never. How are you doing, or we miss you. The money became the language of our relationship, and I was fluent in guilt. I kept thinking that if I worked harder, gave more, they'd finally look at me with pride instead of expectation. I remember one night sitting alone in my home office, staring at my online banking screen. The transactions stretched down the page like a timeline of obedience, every transfer, every sacrifice. I realized I didn't even know if they remembered my birthday, but I knew their mortgage due date by heart. That night I whispered to myself, "You're not their son, you're their paycheck." When the clock struck midnight, I scrolled back through 5 years of payments and wondered if they'd ever think of me beyond those numbers. That thought, more than anger or disappointment, was what broke something inside me. It planted the seed for the moment I stood up at that dinner table and finally said, "Enough." 3 days after that dinner, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from my mother. Her voice trembled between anger and pity. "You can't do this, Ozias," she said. "Your father can't take it. We'll lose the house." I listened to the whole message, every word dipped in guilt and desperation, and when it ended, I didn't call back. I just sat there in silence, feeling the weight of her voice on my chest. For years, she'd known exactly how to use that tone, the one that made me feel responsible for every bad thing that ever happened to them. That afternoon, I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. My hand hovered over the mouse as I stared at the number $6,000 month after month, year after year. The screen looked cold and empty, but familiar, like a cell I'd built myself. My cursor moved to the setting labeled Recurring Payments. I clicked Cancel. A message popped up. Recurring payments canceled. That was it. 5 seconds. 5 years gone. I stared at the confirmation and waited for regret to hit me, but it didn't. What came instead was something quieter, sharper, a mix of relief and grief. It felt like cutting off a limb that had forgotten how to stop bleeding. By that evening, the consequences arrived. My phone lit up with messages, unknown numbers, familiar last names. "Heard you left your parents to lose their home. Tate said you've changed since you married that accountant." I didn't reply to any of them. Every text sounded like the same accusation wearing different clothes. I realized then that my family wasn't just turning against me, they were recruiting others to help twist the knife. When I showed Renee, she frowned, but didn't look surprised. "They'll make it a story where you're the villain," she said. "That's how they cope." I nodded, knowing she was right. That night, while she helped Micah with his homework, I scrolled through social media and saw relatives posting vague things, quotes about ungrateful children, betrayal, family duty. None of them used my name, but they didn't have to. Everyone in Boise's small circle could read between the lines. The next morning at work, one of my co-workers stopped by my desk. "Hey, are you okay? My cousin mentioned something, said you cut off your parents." The words hit harder than I expected. My private decision had turned into public gossip. I forced a smile and said, "Families are complicated. Sometimes they forget what gratitude looks like." He nodded awkwardly and left, but I could feel the whispers behind me the rest of the day. By the time I got home, I was exhausted not from guilt, but from the noise of judgment that surrounded me. I sat on the balcony with Renee that night. The air was cold, the kind of still chill that made the stars seem closer. She leaned against me and said quietly, "You're doing the right thing." I didn't answer right away. I thought about that word, right. It didn't feel triumphant or clean. It felt like standing alone in a snowstorm with no one clapping, no one saying thank you, but knowing you finally stopped sinking. For the first time in years, I wasn't living out of fear of disappointing anyone. I watched the snow fall and realized that silence could feel like freedom. A week passed and life began to look normal again, or maybe I just wanted to believe it was. Renee kept things light for Micah's sake, cooking his favorite dinners, laughing louder than usual. I buried myself in work and ignored the messages I still hadn't read. Then late Monday morning my phone rang. It was Renee. Her voice was calm, but edged with ice. "Tate's at my office," she said. For a moment I couldn't breathe. "What do you mean, at your office?" "He walked in unannounced," she said. "Said he needs to talk about you." Renee's firm sat on 9th Street, a small accounting office where people spoke softly and wore calm expressions. Tate showing up there was like a storm tearing through a glass room. Later she told me exactly how it went. He'd entered red-faced, carrying a folder he probably thought made him look official. "You need to talk to my brother," he told her. "You've changed him. You made him cut off Mom and Dad." Renee had asked him to sit. She didn't raise her voice, didn't look shaken. She opened her laptop, clicked through files, and turned the screen toward him. "This," she said evenly, "is the mortgage record. $6,000 a month. For 5 years. Here's the insurance, $400. Roof repairs, $2,000. Plumbing, $300. These are not stories. These are facts." Tate froze. He didn't expect receipts, only guilt. Renee leaned forward. "If you think I'm the reason your brother stopped paying, look at the math. Look at what he's already done." He didn't respond. His confidence cracked. The room fell silent. Then she stood up and said quietly, "Family can't survive on lies. You need to leave Tate." When she told me that story later, my jaw clenched, but part of me wanted to smile. For years I'd been too cautious, too afraid of starting another argument. Renee had said what I never could. I realized then that she wasn't just my wife, she was my boundary embodied. That night Tate texted me, "You'll regret this. The whole family's against you now." I stared at the words glowing in the dark, then deleted the message. There was nothing left to say. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about power, control, pride, everything they thought they could take from me with shame. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay awake remembering when Tate was a teenager and once said, "You're my role model." He'd meant it back then. We'd spent summers fixing up bikes, sharing music, dreaming about escaping our small hometown. Now he was the one standing beside my parents, aiming guilt like a weapon. Somewhere between then and now, admiration had turned into resentment. The next morning I brewed coffee before sunrise. The house was quiet, the world outside blanketed in white. As the light hit the counter, I realized something. What I'd lost wasn't family. It was the illusion of one. The version of family I'd been feeding with money and silence never really existed. I took my mug to the window, watching the city wake beneath the snow. Renee walked in, kissed my shoulder, and asked if I was okay. I nodded. "Yeah," I said. "I think I finally am." It wasn't peace, not yet. But it was the first breath that didn't feel borrowed. The first morning in years where I didn't owe anyone anything. 3 days after Tate showed up at Renee's office, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in months. It was Aunt Marla. Her voice trembled the way it always did when she was caught between honesty and fear. "Ozias," she said quietly, "I think you deserve to know something." We met that afternoon at Big City Coffee downtown. Snow was falling in thin flakes that melted the moment they touched the ground. I remember sitting across from her, the smell of roasted beans in the air, the wooden table between us cold enough to make my fingers ache. Marla wrapped her hands around her cup, her eyes darting toward the window. I shouldn't even be saying this, she began, but it's been eating at me. She looked at me, then away again. Last year, Tate told me you'd been paying your parents' mortgage all along. He said, Ozias handles everything. I don't have to worry. I felt the room tilt. She kept talking, and her voice got smaller. They knew Ozias. Your mom, your dad, Tate. They talked about it one night. Your father said, he makes more than enough. It's only fair he carries the load. They agreed you'd keep paying because it made sense. She sighed. They never planned to stop you. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was an arrangement. Her words landed like shards of ice. For years I'd told myself that maybe they didn't understand how much I gave, that maybe they thought I enjoyed helping. But this wasn't confusion. It was a quiet pact. Marla hesitated before saying the worst part. Your dad got a warning from the bank last year, something about late payments. Tate told him not to worry, said, if we make him feel guilty enough, he'll catch up. She looked at me, her eyes wet. I thought it was a cruel joke, but now, I think it wasn't. For a long time, I didn't say anything. The sound of espresso machines filled the silence. Someone laughed from another table, and I sat there realizing how deep the rot went. It wasn't just money. It was manipulation dressed as love. My own guilt had been their safety net. When I finally spoke, my voice was flat. They learned to survive by keeping me ashamed. Marla nodded, her face soft with pity. You're not wrong, she said, but you have to stop letting them use your kindness like a leash. I walked out of the cafe into the thin snow, the air sharp in my lungs. Driving home, I didn't turn on the radio. The streets blurred past, gray and empty. All I could think about was every time I'd stayed silent, every check I'd written, every call I'd ended with, it's okay, I understand. I didn't feel angry. I felt hollow. I realized I'd mistaken sacrifice for virtue and pity for duty. When I got home, Renee met me at the door. She saw my face, didn't ask, just rested her hand on my shoulder. That small gesture said everything. You don't have to carry this alone anymore. Later that night, I sat on the edge of the bed and unlocked my phone. I found Tate's contact, stared at his name for a long minute, then pressed block. No dramatic speech, no final message. Just silence. The kind of silence that doesn't come from surrender, but from choosing peace. Sometimes endings don't roar, they just click. It was a quiet morning in mid-December when Renee called me downstairs. Her tone was calm, but her face wasn't. You need to see this, she said, holding out her phone. On the screen was a post from my mother's account on X. My son changed after marriage. His wife controls him. We might lose our home because of her greed. Beneath it, my father had commented, we raised him better than this. There were already dozens of replies. People I didn't even know were calling me heartless, selfish, a failure as a son. A few old neighbors from Meridian had even joined in. My stomach dropped. I felt like the floor had vanished under me. Micah walked into the kitchen, tying his shoelaces, and I turned the phone over before he could see. Everything okay, he asked. I forced a smile. Yeah, buddy, just grown-up stuff. But inside I was unraveling. The betrayal wasn't just personal anymore, it was public. By noon, I got an email at work from an address I didn't recognize. It had a screenshot of the post and one sentence: how could you abandon your parents? The message spread fast. A colleague stopped me in the hallway and asked if I was okay if what people were saying online was true. I said it was complicated, but the damage was done. In a small city like Boise, gossip traveled faster than snowmelt. That afternoon, I printed the posts and brought them to Geneva Rowe, a lawyer I'd worked with before. She read them quietly, her expression unreadable. Then she said, you can't control what they say, but you can control how you respond. This isn't about revenge, Ozias. It's about boundaries. We spent hours drafting a formal letter, calm, professional, final. It demanded that my parents remove the posts and cease spreading false information. She also suggested setting up a trust fund for Micah, making sure none of my assets could be touched or claimed in the future. As she spoke, I realized how far I'd come from that dinner table. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was rebuilding. That evening after dinner, I sat at my desk and signed the papers. The trust was official. The letter was sent. I opened my phone, scrolled through contacts, and blocked the rest of my extended family. Cousins, uncles, even old family friends who'd chosen sides. One by one gone. My feed became empty. My world smaller but quieter. When I finally set the phone down, an odd calm filled the room. Renee sat across from me reading Micah a bedtime story, her voice soft and steady. The house felt safe again, like a circle no one could breach. Still, as I looked out the window, the snow kept falling soft, relentless, endless. That night I stepped out onto the porch. The street was blanketed in white, untouched silence. The air was so still it felt like the whole city was holding its breath. I thought about how much noise my family had made trying to break me and how this silence right here was the loudest victory I could have. I wasn't naive. I knew something else was coming. People like them didn't fade quietly. But for that moment under the Boise snow, I let the stillness settle in my chest. It wasn't peace forever, but it was peace enough for now. And this time, I wasn't afraid of the storm that might follow. I was ready for it. It was a cold morning at the end of December when my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in years. The voice on the other end was a friend from college who now worked at Idaho Credit Union. He spoke softly, almost apologetically. "I thought you should know," he said. "Your parents' house in Meridian, it's been repossessed. 3 months of missed payments. The bank's already taken it back." For a few seconds I couldn't speak. I just sat there, my hand frozen around the phone. I had imagined this moment before in flashes of anger, me finally free them, finally facing what they'd built. But now that it was real, I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt hollow. I drove to Meridian that afternoon. The roads were slick with ice, and the sun had already begun to fade behind gray clouds. When I turned onto their street, I saw it immediately, the red and white sign in front of the house that had once been my childhood home. Bank owned. The words looked brutal in the winter light. The front windows were closed curtains, drooping the porch steps buried under snow. A moving truck sat in the driveway, men in heavy coats carrying boxes through the door. My father stood on the walkway, his jaw tight. My mother was beside him, holding a half-packed box like it might break apart in her hands. Tate was there too, stacking books into a bin. He avoided my eyes the moment he saw me. My father turned first. "If you came here to watch this, congratulations," he said, his voice sharp. "You got what you wanted." I took a breath. "I didn't want this," I said quietly. "I kept this house standing for 5 years. You're the ones who let it fall." My mother's eyes welled up. "We're family, Ozias. We're supposed to take care of each other." I shook my head. Family isn't one person carrying everyone else. There was no yelling, no scene. Just the sound of boxes thudding against the truck bed and the low hum of a cold wind. Tate walked over clutching a box of old photo albums. His voice was low, almost guilty. "They didn't tell you," he said. "They were planning to sell the house last spring. They wanted to take the equity and invest it through me. When you cut the payments, the plan fell apart." I looked at him, disbelief hardening into something else. "You were all using me," I said. He didn't answer. The silence between us was heavier than the snow falling around us. When I turned to leave, Tate called after me. "You happy now? You won." I stopped by the car and looked back at him. "No one wins," I said. "We just finally stopped pretending." I drove home through a curtain of snow. Boise looked washed out under the gray sky, the city half asleep in the cold. When I walked into the house, Renee and Micah were in the kitchen baking cookies. The smell of sugar and cinnamon filled the air. Renee looked up from the counter, her expression soft. "Are they okay?" she asked. "They're free now," I said, "and so are we." Later that night, I sat on the floor of my office, pulling out the old box I'd kept tucked beneath the desk. Inside were stacks of receipts, mortgage payments, insurance slips, repair invoices, proof of every month I'd carried them. I spread them out across the carpet, running my fingers over the faded ink. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt done. I had paid my debt to them, to my guilt, to the idea of what a son should be. Outside, snow kept falling, covering everything in silence. And for once, that silence felt like mercy. A week later, Boise was blanketed in white. The world outside looked clean, quiet, untouched. I spent the morning upstairs in my office sorting through old files. It felt like clearing out a life I'd already left behind. In the bottom drawer of a cabinet, I found the small cardboard box, again the one filled with 5 years' worth of mortgage receipts, insurance payments, and bills I'd long since stopped thinking about. I carried it to the desk and opened it. I laid each slip of paper across the surface, the dates stretching in perfect order from the first month to the last. The ink had faded, the paper yellowed at the edges. Every one of them was a reminder of the same thing I'd spent half a decade trying to buy, love that was never for sale. I picked up the very first receipt, the one from the month I started helping. I remembered my father's words when I told him I'd cover the mortgage for a while. "You're not doing this out of kindness," he'd said. "You're just trying to prove you're better than us." Back then, I'd brushed it off as pride. Now it felt like prophecy. He didn't want my help. He wanted control. I stacked the papers, neatly placed them in an envelope, and sealed it shut. On the front, I wrote, "For my own memory." It wasn't evidence for anyone else. It was a reminder for me never again to mistake guilt for duty or love for obligation. As I was tucking the envelope away, Micah appeared at the doorway holding a mug of hot chocolate, steam curling from the top. "Dad," he asked, "why don't we visit Grandma and Grandpa anymore?" I looked at him, at his wide, curious eyes, and thought about how much truth a child could handle. I crouched down to his level. Because sometimes, I said, loving someone doesn't mean you have to let them hurt you. Sometimes you have to stop even when it feels wrong. He frowned, thinking it over, then nodded slowly. "Okay," he said, and walked away. I watched him go, realizing I'd just given him the lesson I'd learned too late. That evening, my phone rang. It was Aunt Marla again. "I just wanted you to know," she said softly. "You did the right thing." They've moved into a small apartment in Garden City. They still talk, but people aren't listening anymore. Her words were both sad and reassuring. She paused before hanging up. "Don't let them make you doubt yourself, Ozias." "Not now." I thanked her. It felt like the last bit of validation I needed. Later that night, an email came from my mother's address. I stared at the subject line for a long time before opening it. The message was short, just one sentence. "We never needed your money. We needed your obedience." I read it twice, then clicked delete. No anger, no reply, just an end. That Christmas Eve, the house glowed with warm lights. Renee and Micah were decorating the tree, and I joined them, lifting the silver star that had once belonged to my mother. I set it on the top branch, the metal catching the soft light from the window. For a moment, the past and present overlapped. The child I had been, the man I had become, standing in the same silence, but no longer trapped by it. Renee handed me a cup of cocoa. Micah laughed at the mess of tinsel on the floor, and for the first time in months, I felt peace. Not the kind that demands forgiveness or forgetfulness, but the kind that comes when you finally stop apologizing for surviving. As the snow outside thickened, I watched the reflection of our little family in the window, the three of us standing together beneath the glow of the tree. And I thought, family isn't blood. It's whoever stays when everything else falls apart. That's what I'd learned, not through arguments or apologies, but through quiet, painful clarity. Love without gratitude isn't love, it's a debt that never ends. And boundaries, I finally understood, aren't walls. They're doors you close gently so peace has somewhere to stay. The story ended there, not with victory or loss, but with freedom, the kind that doesn't make noise, the kind you earn by letting go. It's strange how a story that began with something as simple as a family dinner could unravel everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and the meaning of home. When I look back now, I see it not as the night everything fell apart, but the night the truth finally stepped out of the shadows. For years, I kept telling myself that family was sacred, that blood was enough to hold people together. I believed that giving without limits was noble, that silence was strength, and that one day gratitude would come back around. But love built on obligation is a fragile thing. It bends until it becomes something else: fear, guilt, resentment. And by the time you notice, you've already lost yourself. There were years when I thought I was the hero in a quiet story, saving my parents from financial ruin, carrying burdens they couldn't bear. Now I realize I was part of their illusion too. I wanted so badly to be seen that I mistook dependence for connection. Every transfer I made was another way of saying, "Please just notice me." And they did, but not for who I was, only for what I could give. It took losing them to understand that love without respect is a slow kind of suffocation. You stop breathing and don't even notice until one day you finally do. People talk about family like it's a guarantee something unbreakable, but the truth is, family can fracture quietly long before the first argument ever happens. It happens in the way someone dismisses your joy, or the way pride replaces affection. It happens when love becomes transactional, when care turns into a currency. I used to believe cutting ties meant failure. Now I see it differently. It's choosing peace over performance, truth over appearances. Sometimes walking away isn't cruelty. It's mercy for everyone involved. When I canceled that payment, I didn't just stop the money. I stopped feeding a version of myself that existed only to please others. I stopped apologizing for succeeding. I stopped believing that being a good son meant being a silent one. I can't lie, it hurt like hell. There were nights when I doubted everything, when I wondered if I'd gone too far, if maybe I was the selfish one. But then I'd look at Renee and Micah and I'd see what real love looked like: mutual, quiet, steady. The kind that doesn't demand proof or payment. I think about my parents sometimes. I wonder if they ever pause before they talk about me, if there's ever a flicker of memory where they remember all the years I tried to make them proud. I wonder if they ever feel regret, or if pride has swallowed that too. But even if they never do, it doesn't matter anymore. I've stopped needing apologies that will never come. I've stopped needing their understanding to validate my choice. The hardest lesson I learned was that closure isn't something others give you, it's something you decide to take. There's a strange kind of peace in letting go. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small moments: blocking a number, deleting an email, walking past the place that used to hurt and realizing it doesn't anymore. It happens the first time you tell your child that love should never mean losing yourself. It happens when you sit in your own home surrounded by laughter and realize the absence of certain voices doesn't mean emptiness, it means space for something better. If I could tell my younger self one thing, it would be this: you don't owe anyone your silence. You don't have to bleed to prove your worth. The people who truly love you will never ask you to destroy yourself to keep them comfortable. They will meet you halfway. They will celebrate your strength instead of punishing it. I used to think family was a matter of bloodlines and last names. Now I think it's a matter of shared decency. It's the people who show up when things get hard, who don't keep score, who don't use love as leverage. It's the people who see your flaws and choose kindness anyway. Sometimes that's your parents, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's the family you build one small act of honesty at a time. There's a kind of freedom that doesn't come with celebration or applause. It's quiet, almost invisible. It lives in the way you breathe easier after years of tension, the way your shoulders stop tensing when the phone rings. It's not dramatic, it's steady, like exhaling after holding your breath for too long. That's the kind of freedom I live with now. Not perfect, not painless, but mine. And maybe that's what this whole story was about. Not revenge, not justice, not proving anyone wrong. It was about learning that love without respect is not love at all, that giving without boundaries is not generosity, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for others is refuse to enable their comfort at the cost of your own peace. I know there are people who will hear my story and think I'm heartless. They'll say I should have forgiven, that I should have found a way to fix things. But forgiveness without accountability isn't healing, it's erasure. I forgave them in my own way, not by pretending the pain never happened, but by choosing not to carry it anymore. That's my version of peace. When I think of that dinner now, the clinking glasses, the laughter that felt like mockery, the moment everything went silent, I don't feel anger. I feel clarity. It was the night I stopped performing a role and started being a person. It was the night I realized that I don't need to be understood by everyone to be at peace with myself. Tonight, as I sit here writing this, Renee is upstairs reading to Micah. The house smells faintly of cinnamon again, just like it did that winter. Outside, snow falls quietly over Boise, covering the streets, softening the noise of the world. It feels almost poetic the way everything eventually settles. The wounds close, the voices fade, and what remains is truth, bare, simple, unshakable. So here's what I've learned, and maybe it's all I'll ever need to know: love people deeply, but never lose yourself trying to keep them. Give but only from abundance, not from guilt. And when you finally decide to walk away, do it with grace, not rage, because peace is not found in the noise of being right, but in the quiet of being free.